He was a Korean Mafia boss, until one kiss with his Afro assistant shattered every rule he lived by. Zuri Kamal's fingers trembled as she slammed the folder onto the glass desk. The numbers inside were wrong, catastrophically wrong, and the man standing 3 feet away already knew it. Kang Do-hyun didn't raise his voice. He never did. He simply looked at her, eyes cold enough to freeze blood, and said, "Fix it, or leave." In that single second, the air between them changed. Something dangerous and unspoken crackled across the silence. Neither of them moved. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from. And if stories like this keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button and like the video so the algorithm knows to keep them coming. Zuri's first full week at Kang Group had already taught her that mistakes were not forgiven. The temporary assistant position was supposed to be quiet. 6 weeks of answering calls, organizing schedules, and staying invisible while the permanent executive assistant recovered from surgery. She had not expected the CEO himself to notice her existence, let alone summon her into his private office on the top floor of a building that felt more like a fortress than a corporation. Kang Do-hyun was 34, tall, and carved from something sharper than stone. Black hair, precise, never a strand out of place. A face that looked expensive even when expressionless. Rumors floated through the lower floors that he was more than a CEO, that the Kang Group's legitimate empire sat on top of something older, bloodier, and far more absolute. Zuri tried not to listen. She needed the paycheck. After 3 years of unstable contracts and late rent notices in a city that never slowed down for people like her, this job was supposed to be a bridge, not a battlefield. That morning she had arrived early, determined to prove she belonged. A simple task, transferring a set of confidential acquisition documents into the secure server, had somehow corrupted 3 critical files. She still didn't understand how. She had checked the login twice. Her credentials, her timestamp, yet the numbers no longer matched the originals. The valuation of a major shipping subsidiary had plummeted by nearly 40% on paper, and the timestamp carried her digital signature like a brand. Do-hyun stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Han River, backlit by gray morning light. Rain streaked the glass in thin silver lines. "Explain." "I don't know what happened," Zuri said, voice steady only because she forced it. "I followed protocol. The files were clean when I uploaded them." He turned. For a moment something flickered behind the ice in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. Then it was gone. Protocol does not care about intent. Results do. She should have apologized and left. Instead, she stepped closer. The polished floor felt cold under her heels. "Then let me fix it. Give me an hour." A muscle in his jaw tightened. He studied her the way a man studies a risk he has not yet decided to take. Zuri was tall for a woman, skin the deep brown of polished mahogany, natural hair twisted into a neat crown that somehow made her look both professional and defiant. She did not lower her gaze. Most people did. She had learned long ago that looking away only invited people to decide her worth for her. "1 hour," he said finally. "If the board sees those numbers before noon, neither of us will still be standing here." She worked at the side desk while he made calls in rapid Korean, voice low and clipped. The air smelled of expensive cologne and rain on glass. Every few minutes, she felt his eyes on her. Once, when she looked up, their gazes locked. Something electric and unwanted passed between them. She looked away first, but the heat lingered on her skin like a hand that refused to lift. At 11:47, she found the anomaly. A single line of code had been inserted after her upload, something that rewrote the valuation figures downward with surgical precision. It carried her digital signature. Impossible. She hadn't written that code. She hadn't even known the system allowed such a late insertion without secondary authorization. "Mr. Kang," she said, standing. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Someone altered the files after I finished." He crossed the room in 3 long strides. stood close enough that she could feel the heat of him. He read the screen over her shoulder. Silence stretched until it felt heavy enough to break glass. "You're certain?" "Yes." He straightened. For the first time that morning, the mask cracked. Just slightly. Not anger. Something closer to recognition that a knife had been placed at both their throats. His hand rested on the edge of the desk, knuckles pale against the dark wood. Before either of them could speak, the door opened without a knock. Do-hyun walked in like she owned the air. Impeccable black suit, blood-red lipstick, eyes that had never learned softness. She was Do-hyun's former partner in every sense that mattered: business, bed, and blood. High enough in the organization that even the council listened when she spoke. She stopped when she saw Zuri, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "So this is the new distraction." Do-hyun's voice turned glacial. "Hyun, you don't have an appointment." "I don't need one when the numbers are bleeding." She stepped closer, gaze raking over Zuri with open contempt. "An assistant who can't even protect a file. How long before she costs us more than money?" Zuri felt her spine straighten. The old instinct to shrink rose and died in the same breath. "I didn't." "You will speak when spoken to," Hyun cut in. Then, to Do-hyun, "The council is already asking questions. Your judgment has been soft lately. Soft gets people killed." Do-hyun's hand rested on the edge of the desk, knuckles white. "Leave." Hyun smiled without warmth. "I'll be at the emergency meeting. Try not to bring your temporary mistake with you." She left as sharply as she had arrived. The door clicked shut with the finality of a gun being cocked. Zuri exhaled. The sound was louder than she wanted it to be. "I should go." "Stay." The single word landed like a command and a plea at once. She turned. Do-hyun was closer than she expected. The careful distance he usually kept had collapsed. Rain continued to streak the windows behind him, turning the city into a watercolor of gray and steel. "That code wasn't yours," he said quietly. "Someone wants you gone. Or wants me weakened. Possibly both. Why would anyone care about a temporary assistant?" He looked at her for a long moment. The ice in his eyes had thawed just enough to reveal something older and more dangerous. "Because I looked at you longer than I should have. Because people notice when I do." The confession hung between them, unfinished and dangerous. Zuri's pulse thudded in her throat. She had spent her life being overlooked, underestimated, treated as temporary. The idea that someone as powerful as Kang Do-hyun had been watching her, really watching, felt both intoxicating and terrifying. She should have stepped back. Instead, she said, "Then tell them the truth. Let me show the logs." The logs can be rewritten. In this world, truth is whatever the strongest man decides it is. His voice had dropped. The office felt smaller. Zuri's pulse hammered harder. She could smell the faint trace of his cologne, feel the charged silence wrapping around them both like a second skin. "Then what do we do?" she whispered. Do-hyun's control, legendary and absolute, finally fractured. He reached up, cupped the side of her face with one hand. Careful, almost reverent, and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was not planned. It was the kind of kiss that happens when a man who has spent years starving himself finally tastes something he was never supposed to want. Zuri's hands rose to his chest, not pushing away, just holding on as the world tilted. His mouth was warm, insistent, tasting faintly of black coffee and something darker. For 3 heartbeats, nothing else existed. Not the corrupted files, not Do-hyun, not the empire built on blood and silence. Only the heat of his palm against her cheek and the quiet, devastating realization that she wanted this as much as he did. Then he broke away as if burned. He stepped back, breathing hard. The mask tried to return and failed. That was a mistake. Zuri's lips still tingled. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Was it?" He turned away, staring at the river. Rain blurred the view into something almost beautiful. "It has to be. You don't understand what I am." "I understand enough." No, his voice was rough. "You understand the CEO. You do not understand the man who sits at the head of a table, where people disappear for less than a glance like the one I just gave you. She moved around the desk until she faced him. The space between them felt charged, fragile. Then explain it. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she saw the exhaustion beneath the ice. The weight of years spent being the man everyone feared and no one truly knew. My grandfather built this organization when Korea was still bleeding from war. My father refined it into something sharper and more invisible. I inherited both the legitimate face and the shadow beneath it. Every decision I make is watched by men who have buried bodies for weaker reasons than wanting a woman I should never have touched. So you regret it. I regret the danger I just put you in. His eyes held hers without flinching. I do not regret the kiss. The admission landed like a second blow. Something inside Zuri shifted, an old wall cracking under pressure it had never been designed to hold. Before either could speak again, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face closed once more, the mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. The council has called an emergency session. In 2 hours. Your name is already on the agenda. Zuri felt the floor tilt. The office suddenly felt too large and too small at once. They're going to fire me. They're going to do worse if they decide you're a liability. He pocketed the phone. Go home. Pack a bag. Stay somewhere public until I contact you. I'm not running. Zuri, I'm not running. Her voice shook, but her chin stayed high. She had spent too many years running from rooms where she was not wanted. She would not do it again. If someone is framing me, I want to look them in the eye. Something fierce and almost proud flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a man already 3 moves ahead. Very well, but you will stay beside me. Do not leave my side once we enter that room. Do you understand? She nodded. The word beside settled somewhere deep in her chest and refused to leave. The next 2 hours passed in a haze of encrypted calls and quiet instructions. Do-hyun moved like a man preparing for war. He spoke in clipped Korean to people who answered on the first ring. He reviewed security footage on a tablet, eyes narrowing at timestamps that did not match the official story. Zuri watched him shed the CEO persona layer by layer until only the Mafia boss remained, controlled, lethal, and strangely protective of the woman he had kissed against every rule he lived by. At one point he paused, looking at her across the desk. You still have time to walk away. No one would blame you. I'm staying, she said simply. He held her gaze for a long second, then returned to the screen. But the set of his shoulders had changed, less rigid, as if some private decision had finally been made. When they arrived at the private residence outside the city, an unmarked compound with high walls and silent men in dark coats, Do-hyun was already waiting in the foyer. She smiled when she saw Zuri, the expression sharp enough to draw blood. How touching, bringing your evidence with you. Do-hyun ignored her and walked straight into the council chamber. Zuri followed, every step deliberate. The air inside smelled of old wood and expensive whiskey. 7 people sat around a long black table. Older men and 2 women, all of them radiating the kind of power that did not need to raise its voice. At the head of the table sat an empty chair that belonged to Do-hyun. He did not take it. He stood, Zuri at his right side, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The eldest member, a man with silver hair and eyes like wet stone, spoke first. Kang Do-hyun, the acquisition numbers collapsed under your temporary assistance credentials. Your former partner claims your attention has been compromised. Explain why this council should continue to trust your leadership. Do-hyun's voice was calm, almost conversational. The files were altered after upload. Digital forensics will confirm it by morning. Someone inside our own ranks planted the signature. Do-hyun laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. Convenient. And who would benefit from framing a temporary worker? Unless the worker was never temporary in her intentions. Zuri felt every gaze turned to her. She kept her spine straight. She had faced worse rooms than this. Rooms where her accent was mocked, Her skin was questioned, her presence treated as a temporary inconvenience. She would not shrink now. Do-hyun's hand brushed the small of her back. Once, brief, grounding. The touch lasted less than a second, but it anchored her. Zuri Kamau has no access beyond what I granted. The timing of the alteration coincides with Hyrin's arrival in the building this morning. Check the security logs yourselves. Hyrin's smile vanished. You would accuse me? I would accuse anyone who threatens what is mine. The room went utterly still. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. The silver-haired man leaned forward. His voice remained quiet, but the weight behind it was absolute. Choose your next words carefully, Do-hyun. That woman is not yours. She is an outsider. Softness has no place at this table. Do-hyun finally looked at Zuri. For a long moment the mask stayed in place. Then, deliberately, he let it fall. The transformation was quiet and complete. The cold CEO disappeared. In his place stood a man who had decided that some rules were no longer worth keeping. I kissed her, he said, voice clear enough for every person in the room to hear. Not because I was weak. Because for the first time in years I wanted something that was not power, not fear, not control. I wanted her. And I am done pretending otherwise. Shock rippled around the table. CO Hyrin's face twisted into something raw and furious. Do-hyun continued, never raising his voice. The quiet was more dangerous than any shout. You can question my judgment. You can vote to remove me. But understand this. If you move against her, you move against me. And I will burn every legitimate company and every shadow operation this family built before I let any of you touch her. Silence stretched until it felt like it might snap. Zuri's heart hammered so hard, she was certain the entire room could hear it. She had never been claimed so publicly, so completely, by anyone. The weight of it settled over her like a promise she had never asked for and somehow already accepted. The silver-haired man studied Do-hyun for a long time. Then he looked at Zuri. His gaze was heavy, assessing, not unkind. Step forward. She did. Her heels clicked once on the polished floor. The sound felt too loud. Do you understand what he just offered to destroy for you? Zuri's heart continued its frantic rhythm, but her voice did not break. She met the old man's eyes without flinching. Yes, and I understand what it cost him to say it out loud. I didn't ask for any of this, but I will not run from it either. If someone tried to use me to hurt him, then I want to be the reason they fail. Another long silence. Then the old man gave a single, slow nod. Something like respect flickered behind the stone of his expression. The forensics will be examined. Until then, the assistant remains under your protection, Do-hyun. Your leadership is not yet in question. But the next time you bring an outsider into this room, make certain she is prepared for the weight of the name she will carry. CO Hyrin stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is a mistake. Sit down, Hyrin, the old man said without looking at her. Or leave the table permanently. She sat. The war in her eyes promised this was not over, but for tonight the battle had been decided. The room slowly returned to low, tense discussions. Do-hyun never left Zuri's side. His presence was a quiet wall between her and every calculating gaze that tried to measure her worth. When they finally stepped out into the cool night air, the compound lights casting long shadows across the gravel, he stopped walking. The distant sound of cicadas filled the silence between them. The city lights glowed faintly on the horizon, far enough away to feel like another world. You should hate me for dragging you into this, he said. Zuri looked up at him. The stoic mask was gone. In its place was a man who looked both exhausted and newly alive, as if something long buried had finally been allowed to breathe. I don't hate you. He reached out, brushed a curl back from her face with surprising gentleness. His fingers lingered for a moment against her temple. I meant what I said in there. About building something real. No more shadows between us. No more pretending the kiss was a mistake. If you stay as more than an assistant. You stay as the woman I chose, knowing exactly what it will cost. She smiled, small and real. The night air felt cooler against her skin, but the warmth in her chest had nothing to do with temperature. Good, because I wasn't planning to pretend either. I'm still temporary on paper, but I'm not temporary in this. He leaned down and kissed her again, slower this time, deliberate, the kind of kiss that promised more than danger. It carried the weight of a decision already made, of rules already broken, of a future neither of them had planned for, but both were willing to claim. When they finally parted, the night felt different. Less like the end of something and more like the quiet, hard-won beginning of everything that would come next. Somewhere behind them, in the darkened windows of the compound, Co Hyrin watched. The war she intended to wage had only just begun. But for the first time in years, Kang Do-hyun was not standing alone. And Zuri Kamau, temporary assistant, outsider, the woman who had been kissed by a Korean mafia boss and somehow survived, was no longer temporary at all. She stood beside him under the night sky, the weight of an empire and a secret and a choice resting between them, and she did not step away. If this story kept you watching until the end, hit that like button, leave a comment telling me what stayed with you the most, and subscribe so you never miss another one.